January 23, 1959. The Ural Mountains in Soviet Russia. 9 experienced hikers set out on a winter expedition to a mountain called Ototen. They were students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. All of them were expert skiers and mountaineers. They had survived expeditions before. This trip was supposed to be challenging but routine. They were well equipped, well trained, well prepared. 3 weeks later, search teams found their tent. It had been cut open from the inside. Their boots and warm clothing lay abandoned. Footprints led away from the tent toward the forest. Bare footprints in the snow, in temperatures of -40 degrees. What the searchers found next would haunt them forever. 9 bodies scattered across the mountainside. Some with injuries that defied explanation. Fractured skulls with no external wounds. Missing eyes and tongues. Radioactive clothing. The Soviet government investigated for months. Then closed the case with one sentence. Death by compelling natural force. What happened on that mountain remains one of the most terrifying unsolved mysteries in history. Welcome to Empire Archives, where history's greatest mysteries come to light. Real stories. Shocking truths. Let's dive in. The expedition leader was Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, a senior engineering student. He was experienced, careful, and respected by everyone who knew him. The group consisted of 8 other members. 7 men and 2 women. The youngest was 20 years old. The oldest was 38, a mysterious man named Semyon Zolotaryov who had joined the group at the last minute. They planned a 2-week trek across the northern Urals, covering nearly 200 miles. The route would take them through some of the most remote wilderness in the Soviet Union. On January 25th, the group sent a telegram from their last contact point. The message was routine. Everything was going according to plan. They expected to return by February 12th. That was the last anyone heard from them. When February 12th came and went with no word, families grew worried. The institute organized a search party. On February 20th, volunteers found ski tracks leading up the mountain. On February 26th, they found the tent. What they saw made no sense whatsoever. The tent was still standing but had been slashed open from the inside. Long cuts through the heavy canvas. As if the hikers had been desperate to escape. But escape from what? Inside the tent, everything was in order. Food was prepared. Clothes were neatly folded. Boots were lined up. The stove was cold but functional. Nothing appeared damaged or disturbed. Except for those cuts. And the fact that everyone was gone. Outside, the searchers found footprints. 8 or 9 sets of footprints leading down the slope toward the forest a mile away. Most were barefoot. Some wore only socks. A few had one boot. The prints showed no signs of running. They were walking, calmly, in a straight line, in the middle of a winter night. In killing cold, without proper clothing. The search team followed the tracks. What they found at the forest edge was the first body. Then the second. Both men were dressed only in underwear. Beneath a large cedar tree, they found evidence of a fire. Small branches had been broken off the tree up to 15 feet high. Someone had climbed desperately trying to see something. Trying to look back toward the tent. But what were they looking for? Over the next 3 months, searchers found the remaining 7 bodies. Some were partially clothed in garments that belonged to others. One woman was wearing a man's jacket. One man wore 2 watches. The clothing had been removed from the bodies found first and put on the others. But why? And some of the clothing tested later would show traces of radioactive contamination. Not enough to kill, but enough to be inexplicable. The injuries were even stranger. 2 victims had massive trauma. Fractured ribs, crushed chests, fractured skulls. The force required would be like a car crash. But there were no external wounds. No bruises. No cuts. The forensic expert wrote that the injuries were caused by extreme force equivalent to a car accident. But how does that happen on a remote mountain? The most disturbing findings came from 4 bodies discovered in a ravine under several meters of snow. They had survived longer than the others. They had tried to build a shelter. But they too had terrible injuries. One woman, Lyudmila Dubanina, was missing her tongue and eyes. The medical examiner noted these were not removed by animals. The soft tissue was gone before decomposition could explain it. Another victim was missing eyes and part of his face. The Soviet prosecutor in charge of the investigation, Lev Ivanov, was deeply troubled. He was a rational man, an experienced investigator, but nothing about this case made sense. He interviewed witnesses who lived in the area. Several reported strange lights in the sky on the night the hikers died. Orange spheres, glowing objects, moving across the mountains. Other military and meteorological teams in the region that night reported the same phenomena. Ivanov wanted to investigate further. But suddenly, in May 1959, he received orders from Moscow. Close the case immediately. Do not speak about it. The official conclusion was delivered in a single sentence: the cause of death was a compelling natural force which the hikers were unable to overcome. No further details. No explanation. The case file was sealed and classified. It remained secret for decades. When it was finally declassified in the 1990s, investigators found that key documents were missing. Photos were removed. Witness testimonies were incomplete. Someone had sanitized the file. But why? The theories began immediately and continue to this day. Theory 1, avalanche. This is the most recent scientific explanation. In 2021, Swiss researchers used computer models to show that a small slab avalanche could have struck the tent. Not enough to bury it, but enough to cause panic and injuries. The hikers cut their way out and fled. In the confusion and darkness, they could not return. They died of hypothermia. But this theory has problems. Experienced mountaineers would know to stay with the tent and their supplies. Why would they walk a mile away? And how do you explain the severe internal injuries with no external trauma? Avalanches crush and bruise. They do not fracture skulls without leaving marks. Theory 2, military test. The area was used for secret Soviet military exercises. Perhaps the hikers stumbled upon a weapons test. Perhaps they witnessed something they should not have seen. The strange lights reported in the sky could have been missiles or experimental aircraft. Perhaps the military panicked and eliminated witnesses. This would explain the government cover-up. The missing documents. The radioactive traces. But if the military killed them, why make it look so bizarre? Why not just shoot them and bury the bodies? Why create injuries that look like something from a horror movie? Theory 3, infrasound. Some researchers believe natural wind conditions in the mountain pass created infrasound, frequencies below human hearing that can cause extreme panic, paranoia, and physical discomfort. The hikers might have experienced overwhelming terror for no visible reason. They fled in panic. Once outside in the cold, hypothermia and poor decisions led to death. This explains the irrational behavior. The calm footprints of people walking to their deaths. But it does not explain the crushing injuries. The missing soft tissue. The radioactive clothing. Theory 4, indigenous attack. The mountain was considered sacred by the local Mansi people. The name Ototan means "don't go there" in the Mansi language. Perhaps the hikers violated sacred ground. Perhaps they were warned. Perhaps when they refused to leave, they were killed. But the Mansi were peaceful. There is no history of violence. And the Mansi themselves said they would never go near that mountain. They called it the Mountain of the Dead. They had their own stories of strange deaths and disappearances there. Theory 5, something else. Something we cannot explain. This is where the case enters the realm of the paranormal. Some believe the hikers encountered something not human. The strange lights. The impossible injuries. The terror that drove experienced mountaineers to flee into the night without clothing. Could it have been something beyond our current understanding? A phenomenon we do not yet have the science to explain? This theory is dismissed by rational investigators. But when you cannot explain the evidence with any known natural force, what else remains? Lev Ivanov, the prosecutor who investigated the case, gave an interview before his death in the 1990s. He admitted that he believed the orange spheres reported in the sky were connected to the deaths. He said that the government forced him to close the case because they knew something but would not tell him what. He spent 40 years haunted by those 9 deaths. Haunted by the fear in the eyes of the first bodies found. Haunted by injuries that should not be possible. He went to his grave believing that whatever killed those hikers was not natural. At least not in any way we understand. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation. They tested 3 theories: avalanche, hurricane force winds, or slab collapse. They concluded it was an avalanche. Case closed again. But many experts disagree. The evidence still does not fit. The injuries still make no sense. The behavior still seems impossible. And the most haunting question remains unanswered. What did they see? What terrified 9 experienced hikers so completely that they cut their way out of their tent and walked to their deaths in the freezing night? What could cause injuries consistent with a car crash without leaving external wounds? What explanation covers the radioactive clothing, the missing soft tissue, the strange lights, the government cover-up, and the sheer impossibility of the entire event? The mountain is still there. The pass is now officially named Dyatlov Pass in honor of the expedition leader. Hikers still visit the site. They report strange feelings of unease, equipment malfunctions, unexplained sounds. Most stay only briefly. Some refuse to camp there overnight. The local guides will take you to the site, but they will not stay after dark. They have their own stories. Things they have seen. Things they will not talk about openly. The mountain keeps its secrets. What killed the Dyatlov group? We may never know with certainty. What we do know is this: 9 people experienced something so terrifying that they chose to face certain death in the frozen wilderness rather than stay in the safety of their tent. Something happened on that mountain that defied their training, their instincts, and their will to survive. Something that 65 years later we still cannot explain. Some mysteries are solved with science and investigation. Some mysteries remain locked in the past, guarded by silence and fear. And some mysteries, perhaps, are better left unsolved. Because the answer might be more terrifying than the question. The Dyatlov Pass incident is all three: a warning, a puzzle, and a door we may not want to open.